back to Florus's history, part 3. So therefore, with Ablative Absolute, Brutus and Collinus as the Ductibusses, these usual generals or leaders, and Octoribus, they're the power behind something. They're in charge of maybe giving laws or rules or something. Quibus, take that as to whom, here we go, Mori and Matrona. The dying matron had Mandavita, they were entrusted her revenge to these guys. The people Romanus, the Roman people, to Vindicandum, that's the gerund, so to take revenge of liberty and it's a neuter. To revenge on a certain honour of liberty and chastity or modesty, as if by the instinctive of the gods, the prodding of the gods. Again, this is a group of people listed as singular, so we see them singularly concitus, so they were stirred up, and they destituted repente, which means suddenly their king. So they got rid of their king, disposed of him. They deripited, they seized his bonus, which is neuter plural, they seized his goods. They consecrated his agrum, the land he had, to their Mars, it's one of their gods. And blah, 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 they've transferred the imperium, which is the real power, onto these same people, the Vindices, these avengers. You can see it's related to that up there. This one's the noun of it, and that's the gerund of the verb. And so these avengers of their liberty came up on these eostem, these same people up here. Nevertheless, there was a mutate. There was a changing both in jure, rights, and in name. So these guys kept power, but they just changed their rights and name. Quippy. Since from perpetual office it was placuated, it was decided, and this can be in some manuscripts it's just got one U. Anyway, it was changed of a year instead of being perpetual. So it looks like they're holding power for a year, and duplex leaders were now going to be coming from where there was a singular leader before. And it's lest the power, the potestas, should be in a solitude of one, or should be corrupted. Usually more means a delay, but just a long period of time. So if someone was holding the potestas, the power, by himself for a long time, they might be corrupted. And they appellevated, the Roman people, they called them consuls. Now, pro regibus, in place of kings, they now had consuls. Looks like, yep, it's a subjunctive, so it's so that they would remember that they ought to console, or I guess that's where you get consul from this verb, for their citizens. They should be making decisions for their citizens. And from the qui, and tantum, such was the gaudium, which is a neuter, such was the joy of this new liberty, which had incesserated and entered, that vix, scarcely they could carperent, they could sense or feel or take, their feedem, they could scarcely trust, they could take any trust of this mutated status, of this changed status, so it'd have to be fourth declension. Another and qui, and alterum, which means 1 out of 2 from the consuls, the maritum of Lucretia, that would be the husband. Tantum, we'll leave that for now, because of his name and his genus, so his name and his, so his genus would be his stock, where he's come from of kings, so because of his name and must have had some royal blood in him, that's what this tantum would be. Such was it that there was, of his birth and his name, that having been abrogatus from fascibusses, having been, have the fasces taken away from him, the emblems or symbols of power, they demissed him, they demiterated him from the herb, they sent him out of the city. Okay. Itiqui. And so, substitutus Horatius Publica. So Horatius Publica was substituted for this other guy that they drove out. And Nixus est, and he strove, or was relying on, we'll take it as he was striving, with the utmost studium, with the utmost zeal, to organdam, that takes a female thing, the maestem would be what it is, this is a gerundive, so that he strove very much to increase the maestatem, that's the majesty of the freedom of the people. Sometimes a king can be called a maestatem, and also I think treason sometimes is referred to by that. But it looks like he was striving to increase the majesty of the freedom of the people. For also the fasces, these are the bundles with the rods and the axes, he submitted, so he lowered them. Sub has that sense of coming from under. Pro conte. So at an assembly, looks like he sent down the fasces, and he deaded it. He gave the jus, that's the neuter, the right, so it's not sup or anything, it's the right of provocation adverse themselves. So there's two of these guys, and he's given them the right of provocation, which is calling for an advocacy or contra the decisions against themselves, these consuls, and nes in specie, and lest he should offend her with the appearance of a citadel or a stronghold. He submitted it again. He sent down his, with his high house being sent down, so he must have had a house somewhere up high. Now it is submitted. It was sent down into the plana, into the flat ground, so he wouldn't offend anyone with his appearance that he lived up high, up in a stronghold or a citadel. Brutus Vero. But Brutus, to the favour or support of the citizens, even sua domus, even his own house, he vilificator says. So this comes from vilificor if it's the opponent. I think there's a normal positive of it as well. It means to set sail or direct to. So he was directing to the favour of the citizenry, even with a disaster in his own house and a parricide. So he's killed a family member. Since cum studere, with some zeal, the desire maybe, of recalling into the city, compares. So he discovered that his own sons, liberos suos, wanted to recall into the city. So I guess this is taking the ablative. He wanted to bring kings back to the city. So he discovered his sons would be on some plot to make kings again. So he protracted them into the forum, and media contione. Again, in English we use middle of. In Latin they just use the same case. So they'd have media in the ablative with contione. So in the middle of an assembly, he knocked them down with verguses, which are rods, and he percussed them with securies. Usually means to behead them with an axe or something. So that plane, clearly, the public parent, he would seem to be, and to have, this comes from a verb of head verb, so takes the infinitive. He seems to have adopted the people in place of his own sons, in locum liborum. Liber yang hinc populus Romanus, so the free Roman people now, hinc from then on, were the first adversus exteros, against external people. They cooperated, here it means they've grabbed arms for liberty. So for liberty's sake they took up arms against external nations, and soon pro finibus for so they could get more land, then pro socis, then for allies, then for glory and imperium, glory and power. Looks like there's a reason here, assiduously or continuously, ablative absolute. They were being licentibus usque quaque finibus. So they're being provoked by their neighbours, the finibus, on all sides. It looks like usque quaque, wherever you want to look. And we'll scroll a bit down to here. Okay, Daily Dictionary, vilificatus, vilifico. Sail a ship, operate sails, set direct course, that's more of this meaning, to direct your efforts towards something or to work for. So there's basically two options, something to do with ships and directing and working for something. Now, where were we? Okay. Since when nulla globs, when no globs of patriarchal soil, when, of their native soil, so it looks like there wasn't any native soil for them, but immediately the Pomerium, that's the area outside of the gates of Rome, and it's neuter, was hostile. So once you got outside the walls, all of the land was hostile. And in the middle, between Latium and Tuscany, or Tuscos, whatever that is, as if into a certain bivio, that's two roads or something, two roads meeting, was conlocatus. So outside these, so there's a meeting place between these two places. So with all of their porters, all their gates, they incurred into hostem. So they ran into enemies, basically because there's looks like a highway or something outside of their walls, going between places, which is all owned by enemies. Okay, until quasi, as if a contagion, or just like a contagion, I'm Itum per singulis. So they went to each single one, proximus quibus. So they took on these enemies singularly, based on proximity. So the ones that were closest, they attacked in singular form. Corruptus, they grabbed them all, until they redegranted. They drove all of Italy, totem Italia sub se, under themselves, into their own power. Next chapter, Pulsis urb regibus. Okay, with the kings Pulsis repulsed, driven out from the city, the first arms they corripited, they grabbed or took up, were for liberty. For Pulsina, Rex of Etruscans, Pulsina the king of the Etruscans, Adorat, he was at hand, he turned up with Ingentibus Copus, with a huge amount of forces. And looks like he wanted to do something. He wanted to bring back the Tarquinists, these were the former kings, by hand, or by force, you might want to say. Nevertheless, Hunk, this is the male, although he pressed on with arms and famine. Okay, so that's in the accusative. Having occupied the Janiculum, which would be some area, he was pressed with arms and with famine. He was incubating, he was like brooding or holding the jaws of the city, or the throat of the city. The jaws, the entryway, you might want to say, if you want to think about jaws like that. He was holding a place, and he was holding the jaws of the city. He was sustaining it, he was withstanding. He was repulsed novissime, that means the most recent time, or the end line-up of battle. But he was struck even with such admiration, taking an ut clause, tanta ut, such as that he was superior, but of his own accord, ultra, when he almost had a victory, he struck a fodera, a treaty of friendship with them. So he admired them, so he could have wiped them out, but he struck a treaty. That's it for the day. For then, those three prodigies and the seeming miracles of these Roman names appeared: Horatius, Mucius, and Cloelia, who was a puella, who, unless they had been in the annals, hodie today, they would seem fabulous or made up stories. Okay.